This podcast is brought to you by On Track Studio.
This podcast addresses various mental health challenges, including topics such as suicide, addiction, eating disorders, depression, and anxiety. These discussions may be triggering for some individuals. If you or someone you know is struggling, please seek support from a mental health professional or a trusted individual in your life. Remember, you are not alone, and help is available. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Mind Your Head. This week, joining me in the studio is Annaleise Easlea. Now, this is a truly inspiring story. She has faced many challenges in her life. The mental health struggles she went through during her time in the Navy, a difficult period in her life where she left her marriage, and also being diagnosed with herpes. Despite these challenges and setbacks, Annaliese is one of the most inspiring, resilient, and courageous people I've ever met. She has turned her pain into purpose. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mind Your Head, Annaliese.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you're here in the studio. I think we've been sort of going back and forth. I tried to get you in last year. But yeah, I'm super happy to have you in the studio today. I don't think I've told you this, but I'm a big fan of yours. I love the work that you're doing, and the being an advocate for mental health is something that I'm super passionate about as well. And even like you writing, you wrote a book. Is it centered around your own mental health journey?
It's centered around, I guess it started from my own journey and using what I've learned along my way to help other people, but it's got 9 other stories from other people and how they kept swimming. The title's called Keep Swimming. Yeah. And so, because I think people might relate to mine, but it's quite unique. But if you have like a range of stories, like surely someone will pick up something from either one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely touch on that a little bit later. But I feel like probably the best place for us to start today is sort of your own beginnings with your own mental health journey, and sort of where did it begin for you? Yeah,
it's always a big question. So I think really it started when I was in the Navy. So I was in the Navy for 6 years, and I got out now nearly 5 years ago. And the first 3 years I loved, and I thought I was going to be in like forever. But then like the next 3 years I was like posted up to small ships, and it was just a completely different experience for me. And I had a series of events that happened there that sort of, I guess that's where I really started to struggle with feelings of like feeling isolated and had nowhere to turn. And when you're in an environment like the Defence Force, you're being conditioned to be and act and behave a certain particular way. And then if something's not quite right, you speak up and no one really supports you, then you can really feel like you're at it alone. And so I was up in Cairns at the time, and then that's when I first started to struggle with feelings of like hopelessness and worthlessness. And when I really started dealing with like suicidal ideation, because I didn't really feel like I had an out. And then that was also when I realised I can't really be in part of this organisation anymore. It's not doing my mental health any well. So then I, at 5 years, I put my discharge in, and I left at 6 years. And then as well, because you've been conditioned that whole time to be like a product of the Defence Force, when you leave, all of a sudden it's like this huge identity shift, and you're like, I have no idea who I am anymore. And it's so I thought I would like magically get better, but then I realised like that was like the start of my real downfall from there, because I had no idea how to exist in this world I haven't been a part of for so long. And then I was like a sailor, but no one really had that like shared lived experience. And more or less, it's a big journey, and I still feel like I'm on it now. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started from. Yeah.
So what made you want to go into the Navy, and how old were you when you first went
I was 20.
You were 20?
Yeah, I just turned 20. So I was studying social work at the time, and I was studying social work for a year and a half. And so I only had 2.5 years left of my degree. But then I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to wait another 2.5 years to decide if it's how I actually want to help people. So then instead I like withdrew that same night. I applied for the Navy, and then I just signed up for a 6-year contract. So my logic didn't really work out. I was like, no, 2.5 years versus 6. So it didn't work, but I did it anyway. And also one of the reasons, and it's silly in hindsight, but the show Sea Patrol was on TV, and I loved it. I was like, wow, if that's what I could do too, like, why not?
It's not that silly, because I used to read army books back in the day, and I left school to go in the army.
Yeah, see, they start young. They're like, let's just feed them this material.
And like from my sort of point of view from going in the army, like we weren't sort of around many women, but I guess that culture that I experienced was a lot of bullying. It was a lot of putting you down until you sort of rose up to standards. It wasn't sort of encouraging you to go up to these standards. If people were sort of below and sort of they're falling behind, instead of encouraging them, it was just like peer pressure and bullying, and they either like got better or they quit.
Yes.
What was the culture like for you?
I think it's very, very similar. Yeah. I always like think about it like they almost have to just like completely break you down so then they can mold you into exactly what they need you to be, which makes sense, but then it doesn't really do you any good, you know, because then you're dealing with, I guess, the bullying aspect of it, and then you're questioning your own character or your own morals or your own judgment and your own values even, because everything that they then give you through like recruit school to category training to everything is like how they believe that you should be. And then all of a sudden you take all of these on that you kind of lost the ability to either think for yourself, or if you do, it's not right. And so, I definitely feel it's a very similar experience.
And that's exactly how I felt, because I remember, because I went in at 17 and I was still trying to like develop and like find out who I am as a man. And then the whole time you're getting told how to think, what to do. And then when I discharged, I was like, all right, well, shit, now it's up to me now. And then I had no idea. I lost direction. I was like, I don't even know what I want. Yeah. And I'm so used to getting told what to do every single day, even when to go to bed, what to eat, when to eat. Exactly. And now I was on my own, and I was just like, I got a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah. And how long were you in for?
I was only in for 12 months. I did a gap year.
Well, even they could do like, because of that conditioning, I think it's so strong. Yeah. And that's your whole life for the 12 months. Like you sleep, you everything is the defense force. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially like straight out of school. I went straight from schoolies, shaved ahead, and went
what have I done?
straight into the army. So I guess, that was my experience, was I think similar to yours in that way. Yeah. So what made you, why did you go the posting up to Cairns? Is that part of your...
So when you're in, you can kind of like ask for any postings that you want, but you might not necessarily get them. Yeah. But I was posted to Sydney, and I was posted to like a big ship, like it was a crew of over 200 people for my first posting, and I loved it. But then I wanted to just see Cairns because it's so beautiful up there. And I was like, oh, well, if I can travel there with the Navy. And then I went up there, and then I was on small boats, and it was a crew of only like 70. And then I think the thing is, it's like, if you don't get along with those people on the ship and you're away for months at a time, like where do you don't really have anywhere to turn. Yeah. And so I loved Cairns, like the place, and I still did have really good experiences in the Navy, and I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't be here right now speaking about them. But it definitely did sort of shape the way that my life is now, and continues to still like, impact my life.
How did you cope with those? I guess the stress and...
Yeah, it's probably not well. While I was still in defence, it wasn't too good. Yeah. So I just was more of like a flight sort of response. I would just I left, I posted back down to Sydney, and I was like, okay, I've just got to get out of the Navy. And then I tried to see a psychologist within defence, but I think because you're referred to someone within defence, you don't feel safe enough to explain exactly what's going on or what's happened, because it's all part of the same system. And so I probably didn't like explain exactly how it was impacting me, and I probably didn't have a great understanding of how it was at the time either. But then when I left, it probably still took me from like about a year to a year and a half after my discharge to actually recognise there's something deeper going on here. Like I'm not dealing with this very well at all. And then after I left, it was through alcohol I was dealing with it. And so it took me until I saw my psychologist for the first time. I explained to her my relationship with alcohol and what I was dealing with, which was my depression and all of these things, and how I was using alcohol to cope. And she says, it sounds like you're self-medicating. And then it like clicked, and I was like, oh, I definitely am. That's like the only time I would drink would be like to get happy. And then I drink more to prolong that happiness, because it's like when you're in the depression, you feel heavy and you can't really shake it. But that was just like this quick fix. And so it really made me really evaluate my relationship with alcohol. And then after that, like slowly become more like self-aware. And I think once you remove that piece out of the picture too, you can look at your life with a lot more clarity. Yeah,
absolutely. Because that was exactly sort of how it was for me, was you don't know how to sort of handle these emotions and these feelings at that young age, and not knowing how to do it. And I was the same. Like I turned to drugs and alcohol, and just wanting that quick fix, that quick sort of dopamine hit of just like release and like just feeling like free. You're like, oh, I actually feel way better.
Instant, isn't
it's
it?
instant.
It's like one sip, you're like,
yeah. And then when you're that age, you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. Or another thought I had was, oh, I could probably keep doing this forever.
Yeah.
This isn't so bad. I can keep doing this. And before you know it, you're drinking on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or you're drinking every night, and then you're like, before you know it, you're like, oh, I need it to be happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's like a tough position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah,
because, like, I guess before you kind of deal with your own, struggles with mental health, like happiness is just this thing that, as like kids or something, it's quite easy to achieve. But then now we're like, oh no, we need these external substances to like be happy. We can't just like find it within ourselves, or at least that's what I was like dealing with as well. But it's funny. It's like, I could do this forever. I mean, you probably like people do.
People do. Yeah,
definitely. But it comes at a cost, I think. And then I found like the day after would always be like the worst, and then like my depression would be so much worse because of like the drinking. And then so once I removed it, I kind of was like, oh, okay. It was hard because then you're dealing with like different social situations, and you've actually got to like face the beast front on, and like you don't really have that quick fix.
A little escape, which
I think is what is like keeps you bringing back to it. But I decided like I'll do 1 year sober, and then I made that decision and I stuck to it. I even got married in that time, and I had it like I was sober at my wedding, just had like virgin pina coladas, and I danced all night and had the best time. But it was just a very different kind of reality. And then I did the year, and then I was like, oh, I'll like reintroduce alcohol and like allow myself to have it if I feel like it. But then I was going through a separation at the time, and then I did find I was like, whoa, I started like drinking like in a similar way that I had before. I'm like, actually no. Like I really don't need this. Yeah. Like I'm a much better person without it.
Yeah.
And I have,
do you think there's many women in the Navy that have a similar experience to yours?
I think yes, definitely. Yeah. Just from the people that I've spoken to and shared my experiences with, I think women and men alike have a very similar experience in that it is it's a very tough system, and there is so much I think that needs to change, and it's a very outdated system as well.
It is, yeah.
And I think the way that they, I think they put this emphasis on like, we're looking after mental health, but really when push came to shove, like they weren't, or there's so many different things that they could do differently in someone's like career that would like change like their whole, I guess, mental health like journey. But sometimes it's like you're just seen as a number or a person. They don't think about like
you're a bit of cattle.
Impact. Yeah, they are.
That's how I felt too. It was just like they conditioned me and all the other recruits like so heavily on like desensitizing ourselves to the impact of war and those sorts of things, but they never ever talked about the emotional effect that it could have on someone. Like my mate went overseas and he came on the podcast, and there was no preparation before or anything afterwards to help cope with the things that you might see overseas. Yeah. There's nothing.
Yeah.
They just sort of like show you it on TV screens and sort of like get you used to watching it because you know that possibly you might see it overseas. But they're like the ramifications of seeing that, there was no like talked about at all.
Which is rough, isn't it? Because that impacts you.
Yeah.
These things. Like,
and even he said, like, I was like, well, why did it impact you more than sort of someone else or other people? He goes, well, everyone's different. Like, I'm just really sensitive to that sorts of things. Like, he shows a lot of compassion, and he's not, I wouldn't say, but yeah, was he emotional, Sophie? He was, yeah. So he was just like really sensitive to that sort of thing. And then, so some people can just see it and get on with their job and see it as work. But for him, he's like seeing like innocent people die or situations like that. And he's just like, he really like hit him hard.
And then there's nothing to, like no training or education around like how to deal with that. And I think that's the biggest thing as well. Like in the Defence Force, there's not a lot of, like education around how to deal with what's going on within your mind. Like there's, even just mindfulness, meditation, these things I think should be introduced, because then when you are dealing with the stress of the job, no matter what it looks like for you, or if there is something that's not quite right, and doesn't sit well within you, you kind of have ways to deal with it. But I don't think, they definitely don't, or they haven't addressed that while I was in service.
Well, I don't think it has gotten any better, because I've had a past guest come on, and he was in the army for 20 years or something, and he was saying that there's been more, we've lost more soldiers to suicide than we did in the 20 years of war overseas.
Yeah.
So we've lost more soldiers coming home, taking their own lives than we did actually at war. So it just shows you that the ramifications of being at war, and sort of the effort that the Defence Force as a whole is putting into people's mental health is not there. It's
definitely not there. And like on that as well, I think one of the things is there's definitely a lot of mental impact from war, but now also people aren't even posting to war, and they're dealing with these mental health issues stemming from the way that they're treated within defence. Like my friend Daniel, I dedicated my book to him. He joined the Army when he was 19, died by suicide at 21. And he never posted to war, or didn't post on like operations.
Wow.
He posted up to Darwin, and then it was like, again, like a series of events that shouldn't have happened to him. And even the smallest things could have been done differently. Maybe his, maybe he would still be here. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But I think even, in that, and he actually is a big driver towards like why I got through my depression, like in the, when I was going through it and all of the things that stemmed from the Navy, I was like, no, do it for Daniel, because he no longer has a voice, but you do. So continue to use yours to help people like Daniel within service, or like ex-defence members who are now veterans outside of service, to help them keep going, because, we lose too many people to suicide, and especially like within the Defence Force, for things that could just be done so differently. Like it's unnecessary. It's never necessary, but there's ways that we could change it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So life after the Navy. You said you sort of lost your purpose, and I guess would you say your identity as well?
Yes. Yeah. I think there is still a big part of me that identifies as like, being in the Navy. People, like when I'm traveling, it's weird. It's very strange. Yeah. Like I'll be traveling, like, what do you do? I'm like, and I'll try to explain to them like what I'm doing, but then I'll be like, oh, but I was in the Navy. Like I used it to like justify it almost. Yeah, it's weird.
I've come across other people that were in the Defence Force, especially the Army, and because it was so long ago, it was 14 years ago that I joined the Army. So I've sort of like, that's a whole another life that I've sort of forgotten about. But when I come across people that were in the Army, and they're like, oh, what did what sort of, and I was like, oh yeah, I was in back in the day, and they're like, oh brother, like, and I'm like, oh what? Like I forget that there's a connection there with other people that have gone through as well.
Yeah, and it is, I think even when you said Army, it's like, oh yeah, like it's kind of like without saying it, you kind of already get that shared lived experience. Yeah. But I did feel like I lost my identity, because I joined when I was 20, so like when I was younger, and then so I left when I was 26, and I feel like in that time a lot of people are travelling or figuring out who they are, what they want to do, but when you're in the Defence Force, you are exactly how they say that you are. So when I got out, I was like, okay, I want to like go travelling, I want to do this, that and the other, but I really just didn't expect the whole, I guess, shift and like the loss of purpose, that loss of like community and connection that you have within Defence Force. Like you do have like your brothers and your sisters, and
that shared struggle, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And then I moved back to Brisbane with my then partner at the time, and then we went to Greece, and then I got engaged, which I didn't see on like the cards either. And then like I kind of then was dealing with this shift of not being like, okay, I'm not in the Defence Force anymore, but soon I'm going to be a wife, and then kind of like figuring out like, is that what I identify with? And then
seems very overwhelming.
There was a lot of major life changes, a big move. Like I moved house, I'd like moved away from my friends that I'd had, moved back closer to Brisbane, new house, new career, like started a new job, became engaged. A lot of things without actually like sitting and dealing with the whole reason why I left the defence in the first place, which was my mental health. And then I was like obviously drinking and trying to figure out what it is that I wanted. But then I ended up calling the wedding like off a few times, because I, again, like couldn't figure out how do you make someone happy for the rest of your life if you're like struggling to even figure out who you are, if you're happy yourself. But then like my family and things at the time, they're like, I will like look after the wedding planning and you just focus on yourself. So I did. So I started going to Yeah, see my psychologist, like that was probably a year and a half after I left the Navy. It took me that long to kind of realise I'm not getting any better. And then from there, I just pretty much like went ahead with the wedding. I got married and it was beautiful. It was amazing, but it just unfortunately it was not right for me. And then 9 months later, I was at a friend's wedding and I was watching, and it was a Navy friend, and I was watching all my Navy friends around, and they were like, you know, in their partners, or like they were dancing, having fun. And I felt like a shell of a human. Like I couldn't identify with anything. I didn't identify with being in the Navy anymore. I didn't identify with being a wife, yet I was a wife. And then I just sat there like, I'm not sure where I belong. And then the next day I broke down in the car, and I was just like, I actually can't do this. I need to leave and like leave the marriage and actually just stop and figure out who I am without belonging to like defense, without belonging to a marriage, like actually give myself the freedom to really like work on myself and learn what is it that makes me me, and like what do I want to do. And so it was the hardest decision I ever had to make, and I had to hurt a lot of people, and I don't like hurting people. Definitely more of a people pleaser at heart, but now I've learned I have to prioritize myself, because if my mental health isn't there, then I can't help anyone anyway. So I made the decision to leave, and then have kind of been on my own like path ever since. But it's been, it feels like a million lives sometimes.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Yes. Were you with him when you were in the Navy?
I met him up in Cairns.
Yeah.
And so I think also at that time, like it was a lot easier to go through the things I was going through when you have someone by your side for support. And then he posted, well, he wasn't in the Navy, but he moved to Sydney with me when I moved back to Sydney before I got out. Yeah,
right. Was there always a gut feeling or a thought that I shouldn't be doing this?
Yeah.
There was.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is like we're often so quick to not listen to like the gut feeling.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because then logic comes in and your head comes in. But really, also, I was standing around and I moved back to Brisbane, and all the friends that I had in Brisbane were high school friends, and they'd married with a house or they're looking to get kids. And so when I looked at my life, I'm like, I've got everything everyone wants. You know, like, Annaliese, just be happy with this. And then so you go along with it because it's what society expects of you. It's what you're surrounded by. And, you know, it's the things that people are celebrating. They celebrate you when you buy a house. They celebrate you when you get married. You know, they don't celebrate you when you get a divorce and choose yourself.
It's like ticking that box, isn't it? Like safe job, husband, house. It's all those things.
And I had all the boxes ticked. We moved to a great place, in Cleveland. So I was surfing on Stradbroke every weekend, and I loved it, but it still was not right for me. And I think the thing is, it's so hard to walk away from what everybody else is doing and walk your own path, because inevitably you're going to look like the odd one out. But the minute I did start to choose myself, everything did start to feel better. It still is a journey though. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're a bit of a people pleaser at heart.
Yeah.
Have you got to the root of that?
No, I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I haven't got to the root of it, although I definitely am less of a people pleaser now.
Yeah.
I will only say yes to things if it really aligns with me or if it feels good. I can't really say yes to things in advance often, because I feel, I don't know how I'm going to feel on the day. And then
you said yes to this in advance. So thank you very much.
Yeah. No, this sounds like, no, I want to do this one. But it's funny. It's tricky. My whole life I'd been people pleaser. And then that was also, I guess, me still doing it. I just didn't want to hurt anybody. But by not hurting anybody, I was hurting myself more. And it became a decision between stay and potentially lose yourself, or leave and find yourself and work on yourself. And then if it's the option of if something comes at a cost to your mental health, even if it necessarily shouldn't, you have to choose yourself and you have to do what's right for you.
And that's such a difficult thing in itself, is sort of ending a relationship with someone that hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then try to explain.
Yeah.
That. How did he take it?
Yeah.
Do you think he had an inkling?
Well, we'd had a lot of conversations, especially because I had called the wedding off so many times, and I was like, I just don't know. And he was there, and him and my mum were there supporting me through some of my hardest times throughout the depression, when I was before I saw my psychologist, I'd seen a doctor and she wouldn't prescribe me antidepressants, but I had a month wait. And in that month's time, it was kind of like touch and go. Like I was dealing with suicidal ideation quite frequently, and I didn't quite know if I would make it. And so my fiance and my mum took it in turns to like just be around me, so I wasn't left by myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For how long?
It was for that month period.
Yeah.
I was just breaking down, and it just felt like I just couldn't. It'd been now quite a while dealing with it, and I just
couldn't breathe.
Feels like that. You can't breathe. The heaviness is there. That cloud is there constantly. You're just like walking uphill with like the heaviest bag on, and you can't get any further. So he definitely knew, like in terms of my mental health, like what was going on. I'm sure like no one ever wants to leave a marriage. You don't enter it wanting to leave it. But yeah, it definitely was a hard thing to do, and a hard thing that he would have had to have heal from as well.
How did the family react?
It's tough.
Yeah.
So his family were super understanding, and
his family was.
I think they probably only wanted everyone would only wanted what was best for me. Unfortunately, with my family, I think it really hit home because also we had the wedding at my parents' place, and they did a lot of work to get it together. And there was when I did make the decision to separate, I sort of lost my relationship with my dad for the greater part of the year. And then I lost the support of my mum as well for a while there. And so I moved in between houses for quite a bit because they couldn't support me leaving and hurting my partner. And so, which is fair, like it's very, very tough. And to them, I think it also doesn't look great if your daughter leaves a marriage after 9 months. It doesn't look good for anyone, and I think they really value that. So it was tough.
But also, who gives a fuck what other people think?
Yeah.
You know, how it looks to other people. Like, obviously you've reconciled with your mum and dad.
Yeah.
Have you asked them why they react like that?
Yeah, so it's been a very big journey, and I think I've done as much as I can now to repair that relationship. But at the end of the day, like I not always knew, no matter what other people think, like I had to do what's right for me. Like it's not a question anymore. And so my dad and I didn't speak for probably about 10 months. And then he wrote me a letter explaining like his side, and then I sat him down for 4 hours explaining mine. And,
oh wow!
Yeah, I pretty much went from the start of like, you know, the Navy right through to there, and everything in detail, every single action that I make and why I make it, and it all comes down to the point like everything I do is to prioritize my mental health, because if I don't, and if I'm not mindful of it, and if I don't look after it, then I could slip, and nothing's worth that. And so even though I do have to hurt people, it's not because I want to hurt people. It's because I'm hurting myself if I don't listen to what's good for me.
Yeah, amazing. So afterwards, you're single. You separated.
Yeah.
Was this a time in your life where it was more so looking at self-discovery and looking at what did you want to do with your life? I guess you had not free, but you were free to do whatever you wanted to do. Yeah,
it definitely was. So I was, I guess, free to explore like what I wanted to do, which was really travel. So I pretty much I went to Sri Lanka for 2 months, and I lived over there, and I worked remotely there just to kind of like get my feet wet with traveling solo and see what it's like. And I loved it, and I found like that sense of community there, and you know, I could like wake up, I could go to yoga, I could go surfing. It was just that lifestyle, and things were simple. And then I felt like, again, like that, the heaviness slowly like lift more and more with every decision. And I think a big thing that trip made me realize was how good a change of environment can be. Because if you're in an environment that doesn't nurture you, and then, you know, you're trying to get better, sometimes it just might not work, you know. But as soon as I went to Sri Lanka, and you can see like the greenery, it was quiet, it was peaceful. Everything kind of was like better. And as well, like you're surrounded by people who are doing similar things. So they have that shared experience, or that shared like desire to travel, and
that energy is different. The
energy was very different. So I did that for 2 months, and then I came back, and then that's when I had to move everything out of the house, and sort of then I had to come like face to face with the separation. And I was in between houses, and ended up moving in with my auntie for a few months, which was really, really beautiful, and she was a great support system for me. And then also in that time, like I found myself going downhill pretty quick again, because then I think there's that avoidance when I went to Sri Lanka. I kind of was like, okay, I just left my husband. I'm just, see you guys,
Just
bye.
blocked it out. Yeah.
And then when I came back to Australia, it's like, oh, I've got to adjust to life now. But I came back and then went through a really tricky time with the separation and dealing with everything there. And then I went back to Sri Lanka at the end of that year and then lived there for 3 months. And then when I was there in January, I was getting nervous about coming back to work, like my job. And then so I ended up just to quit. And I wrote a resignation letter, from this cafe in Sri Lanka. And I flew back, worked the 2 weeks, and then flew back to Sri Lanka. And I was like, I want to put 100% into my book, which I had already started working on. And then ever since, like, I just kept making decisions that are right for me. Like, they all take time to kind of come to these big decisions, but sort of like doors open and opportunities come up that you would never have realised unless you start doing them.
Yeah, and it seems like for the very first time, you're sort of putting your priorities or your health first over everything else.
Yeah, and listening to my gut, I think, as well. Like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go back to work. I'm like, why would I? Like, I've just like done all this work to start prioritizing feel good. If something's not making me feel good, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to.
It's like shifting. It's funny because like I was sort of getting a sense that like I had the same feeling when you sort of left the Defence Force. So that structure and routine is something like I thought I needed, but when I left, I was like, I actually love not having that structure and routine.
Yeah.
And then I realised, well, I've just developed my own structure and routine that I actually love.
Yes.
And not sort of being forced to do things or getting told to do things. I'm doing them because I actually want to do them.
Yeah. I'm very much the same. Like, I love having a routine, but on my own terms.
On your terms, yeah.
So it's like I have like what I need to do every single day. And if I don't have these pillars that I tick off, like I can notice maybe I'm not feeling so good that day or, but if I do these things like eat well, move well, sleep well, and then some form of connection every day, and then I'm like, well, that's it.
Yeah, if you stack those up.
Yeah, exactly. But I also run away from that element of control that Defence have, and I'm like, any kind of element of control, I'm like, oh, nah, see ya. I'm like, I need the freedom. Like, you tell me to wear like this strict uniform, like you won't find me wearing shoes half the time because I'm like, I'm not wearing shoes.
Another resignation letter.
Yeah.
So the idea of writing a book, when did that come to mind, and what was the main motivator for that?
It was in August 2019, so it was a few months, about 6 months after I'd got married. And it was sort of, I was dealing with everything that I was working with my psychologist. We had weekly appointments, and I was learning a lot on that journey. But then it was social media actually, and I was looking on Instagram, and even the stuff that I was posting would be like beach days with an emoji or something so surface level that means nothing to anybody with a photo for validation or anything like this. And I was like, why am I posting these things when my life now looks so happy? But no one really knows the struggles that I had. No one knows how hard it was to even get like to the point where I was walking down the aisle. Like, and then yet I'm living this life that again, I would be looking at someone being like, wow, she's got the dream life. She should be so happy. But yet I still wasn't.
So none of your friends knew?
No, I kept it pretty like,
did you?
Yeah. Like on the down low, I think a select few knew, and my partner and my partner's family. But yeah, often like when I did tell people, like, oh, they would have never known because I think that's the thing, you learn well how to
hide it.
Yeah, how to hide it. Or you pick and choose who you can like disclose it to. But yeah, I pretty much like decided to share a post on Instagram being like, this is actually the reality of it. And then I ended up getting a lot of messages on there saying, thank you for sharing. Like, I've actually been going through something similar, blah, blah, blah. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of people talking about it. And so I was just like, oh, if I could use what I've learned to just help one other person, then I've got to try because that in turn helped me. And initially Keep Swimming, my book was just going to be a journal asking 3 questions that you can reflect on your day to, try change it and turn it around. But then as I started this idea on it, it kind of developed into this much bigger thing than I ever thought it would. But it's all around like using what I've learned and what other people have learned on their journeys to share with other people to help them navigate it because we feel so alone when we're going through it, but we're not. And even like I still go through my struggles and I'm very much the last couple of months having a bit of a struggle for me, but I often feel alone. But I have to remind myself, I'm like, no, we're all facing struggles, all at different times to different degrees. It's just that we're not sharing it because the social media world is just very curated. But now, luckily, the space is changing and, it's getting there.
Yeah, it is getting there, isn't it? Like even the conversations with my mates, I think I spoke to you a little bit off camera about it, but it's all changing a lot. Like everyone's, I think as this sort of generation is getting a little bit older, it's showing that vulnerability is not so much of a weakness or anything like that. It's okay to tell someone you're struggling rather than hiding and thinking you're a burden or you're going to annoy someone with it or someone's going to you're going to feel embarrassed or anything. But you realise that like all my friends have gone through something and it only takes one person to sort of come out and say it, that everyone's like, oh, well, I've gone through something as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I found. It's like the minute you start sort of like you share your experience, it creates that safe space for someone else to share. And then all of a sudden, like everyone comes.
People
forward.
are yearning for it as well. Like I'm sure you would have just got bombarded with bloody some messages and stuff.
Yeah, and I think
because people are wanting to talk about it, they just don't know how to.
It's like an invitation. Yeah, when you share, someone else feels safe. And I'm like, oh well, maybe I can go to this person, and it's beautiful because otherwise we sit there in like silence and we just struggle. And it's like
alone,
a never-ending battle. Yeah, alone, yeah.
Was this a bit of a healing process for you writing that book?
Yeah.
Did it? Yeah.
I definitely say it was equally parts. It helped me as much as I hope it might help somebody else. Because at the time when I left defence, I was struggling with that purpose. And I know, like now, like no matter what I do, as long as I follow the path of, like using my voice to help others, I know I'll be like, that's my purpose. I truly believe that. But when I started working on the book, it gave me a reason to get out of bed every day. So even though I was still struggling, I was very much still in the thick of it. I had something to like sort of redirect my energy towards.
A purpose and a drive.
Yeah, a purpose and a drive. And because I also had other people in the book, like I had to connect with people. So I had that connection piece that I was missing since the Defence Force. I had to reach out, start having these conversations and like explain my idea, and then they come on board and then like work with them for it. And it sort of all just became this thing, all the like things that I'd missed since being in the Navy, I then was able to create for myself again. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And talk about talk me through that period of the book launch.
Oh, the book launch. What can we go into here?
Up to you.
All right. So I'll just say, we'll start with the book launch, I guess. This was the most beautiful moment I've ever had, was the book launch.
Was it?
Yeah, the night of the book launch. So there was 80 people there. It was sold out. So
where were you?
West End, in
cool.
Reader.
Yeah.
Had it at a bookstore there. And when I logged on in the morning, I think it hadn't sold out. But then I had a friend, she couldn't get a ticket. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh no, it's not just family and friends anymore. There's strangers going to be in the crowd. Got a little bit nervous. I was like, no one knows your story better than yourself, and no one knows why you did that better than you. So you just speak on your truth. And I got ready, got to West End, and I did a speech in front of like all the people. And then at the end, there was like opened up for question and answers. And everyone that asked, like some people I knew, but then there were strangers in the crowds, like parents wanting to know how to better support their son going through a depression. And then I just found like everything just came out. Like, when you start talking about something you're passionate about, it just works.
You're in the flow.
The flow. Yeah. And then at the end when I did the book signing, it was again that connection piece. I connected with so many people that do want to hear about these things and do want, to, I guess, see that it is okay and you can get through even the most trying of times. So it was really, really beautiful time, but it was also a difficult time in the sense, I suppose I'll go into it, but a week before I found out I was diagnosed with HSV2, which is genital herpes, and that sent me spiraling again, because I wasn't sure. I guess I didn't know much about it, and I didn't really have the mental capacity to deal with that diagnosis, which is a lifelong diagnosis at the time. But I pretty much had, said to myself, I'm going to put that in a box. I'm going to do the book launch and then, just deal with it afterwards. And then afterwards, that's when like everything sort of my mental health went spiraling again and ended up having to reach out to Lifeline more or less because I didn't have a grasp on what this thing was that I was dealing with, and there's a massive stigma surrounding it. But again, I guess how I have with most of the things on my journey, I think when I turn like pain into purpose, it helps me heal it again. So I went through a tricky time with that, with the diagnosis, and then it was it was the same day before I was to fly out to Thailand. I was like, this is either going to be the thing that breaks me or I've got to do something. And so I decided I would again, like how I have with my mental health, use my voice to help other people. And I decided to go public with my diagnosis. And ever since that decision, again, like doors have opened up and my life's changed again more than what I would think. But
for the better.
Yeah, for the better.
Yeah.
I think I always see it for the better because it's helping people. It has been really, really tough though.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And like, talk me through that, because like, I guess you're at a point during the book launch when your sort of your mental health and your headspace is in a good space.
Yeah.
Reasonably good space.
Yeah. Well, it was like, it was meant to be.
It was meant to be, yeah. And then sort of getting this news, it can be so mentally and emotionally difficult to handle. And especially I'm talking my perspective, like I know nothing about it. So I would have went straight on Google and would have tried, worst case scenario. And like, how hard was that to sort of be at, doing the book launch and then getting this news? How much did it impact you, I guess, mentally?
Yeah, it was big.
Yeah.
I remember I had the phone call from the doctor, and it was just a telehealth appointment because I didn't want to get the news in person. I hung up the phone and then I broke and I was just in tears. Like I've never cried like that in my life. Yeah. Because it's almost like you're forced to sort of grieve the life that you had and accept that you now have like a lifelong diagnosis that you don't even understand, that probably not a lot of other people understand. But I think the biggest thing with it is education around it, because Google is the worst case scenario. But once I slowly started to learn more about it, it is so common. And then once I started to speak up about it, I realized so many people in my own circle have it, but no one's speaking about it. Yeah.
And that's interesting because, like, I've seen the stats, and is it 1 in 8 Australians have herpes? And like, from my perspective, like I don't know anyone in my friends group. I've got a massive friends group, and I don't know anyone in my friends group that have it. And do you think there still is a stigma around talking about it?
I think definitely. I think there definitely is. I mean, because I was the same. I didn't know anybody. Yeah. And then once I wrote a piece about my experience on the flight over to Thailand. And then once I wrote it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll share this one day. And then MhP&x Australia published it online. And then I did a podcast last year speaking up about it. And since those two, pieces of information were out there, so many people in my circle and like people I continue to meet, like traveling, they come across my Instagram, then they come to me like for advice or for support or just to know that they're not alone. And it is crazy because I thought I was going through it. I thought no one I knew had it. And then, so many more people do than what we realize, but also so many more people have it and they don't realize because you can be asymptomatic and not know it. Up to 80% of people with it are asymptomatic. So they might not ever know.
What was rock bottom for you during this time? Was that calling Lifeline?
Yeah, that would have been rock bottom. I was babysitting my cat on my parents' hill before I was due to fly to Thailand while they were away. And I pretty much just was spiraling in my head. I didn't quite know how. I hadn't accepted it. And previous to me, like spiraling, I started to see someone and I had to tell him. And then he didn't accept it. And that kind of sent me further down a spiral as well because of I guess at the time, delivery is key. So if I'm not accepting it myself and asking someone else to, of course they're not going to, you have to accept it that this is a part of me and it doesn't define you. But I wasn't at that point in my journey with it yet. But that was probably rock bottom, like not even understanding like how am I possibly going to live in this world forever with this thing that people don't understand. But as soon as I spoke up about it, it released any shame or power that it had over me. And I kind of was just like, you know what? It's just another thing. We all have things. There's great qualities about me. Maybe this is a less than great one, but it's something I don't have control over. So I really just brought it back to what I do with everything when I'm struggling is like, okay, what can I control? My thoughts, my actions, my mindset, my perspective. I can't control the fact that I've got it. I can only control how I move forward with it. And so it's really just like reframing that mindset. And then also I think then I sort of started to develop my own community of people that I know who, do have it. So you realize you aren't alone, just like mental health. Like we're never alone. We just think that we are. It's just that maybe we're not speaking up about it.
Absolutely. And especially with like, I guess herpes is that there's no, I guess, it's lifelong, but there's no sort of like damaging things it can
Yeah.
do to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Apart from mentally, it's more of a
Yes.
mental thing than
Yeah.
anything, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. Like some
Yeah.
people do get really, really like bad, like physical symptoms. But for me, fortunately, you know, I thought I'd cut myself shaving. That was back in May last year. I haven't had anything since then. And I do attribute a lot of that to the fact that I'm very mindful of my stress, and it is a response to stress that triggers it up.
Is it?
But
Okay.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so, you know, and I don't drink alcohol, and I don't know if those are the things that would be triggers for me anyway, but I do feel lucky in the fact that it doesn't affect me physically. It did mentally, but yeah, it is one of those things. It's no different to getting like acne on your face or it's a skin condition.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the same family as chickenpox.
Yeah.
You know, but the fact is, it's like, or even a cold sore.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes it's the same as cold sore.
Yeah.
It's just the location that may be different.
Yeah.
But we don't go freaking out all the time that someone's got a cold sore and
Yeah,
like,
it's
looking
like
at them
that.
differently.
That education around it, it's like with like talking about I guess like sexual health. Like we're always encouraging people to be you know, sexually healthy and that sort of thing, and like, you know, be yourself. And if you want to be, you know, out there sexually, it's all good. But we don't speak the same way about talking about sort of STIs and that sort of thing. It's sort of like frowned upon almost, isn't it?
Yeah, I found that a lot. Like we encourage people to be very open sexually and explore their sexuality, which is great. But, you know, when we actually be like, oh, you know, talking about safe sex or having these conversations, it's a bit tricky, you know? And I really noticed the impact of how much that stigma still does exist. Probably only a couple of weeks ago, news.com.au did an article with me about it, and then I'd agreed to it, and then New York Post reshared the article online without my permission and left comments on. And the comments was over 400 people like spreading like hate towards me and judgment and really, really hurtful comments where it just shows how like real that stigma is and unnecessary, and it's just this lack of education surrounding it. The article's like since been removed because that also was like impacting my mental health, but it really just shows you like, oh, this is like this thing that exists that people they just don't care enough to learn about. Like if they just educate themselves on it, they realize it's not a big deal, or, you know, they're likely to either be exposed to it one day, know someone that's got to be exposed to it and have to support them. But it's the same with anything that's stigmatized or any kind of minority groups. Like people are scared of what they don't know, and if they're not willing to understand it, then it makes it very, very difficult to sort of empathize with someone or be supportive towards them.
Yeah, absolutely. What was I guess your headspace around it was obviously the fear about dating again and finding love.
Yeah.
What was it like sort of telling someone?
Well, it's that first time I told someone, I was
Shitting yourself.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I was. I just called him on the phone, and I was like, oh, and I think it took me so long to get it out. It's like, so I've got something to say. I don't know how to say it. I've never said it before. Blah blah blah. And that even that tone of voice and the energy I was putting out would have freaked him out without me even saying anything. I made it a big deal before, and then trying to tell him it's not a big deal. Like it just doesn't match up. But yeah, since then it just makes me really careful, like who I do have these discussions with. Like I will only really disclose to somebody if I really wanted to go further. But that was then. But now, because I'm public, inevitably people are going to find out anyway.
Yeah.
It generally, if people ask me like, you know, what am I doing? I just say, you know, I've done this, and then that just slips into it.
Yeah.
If people accept it, they accept it. But if not, that's completely fine. It's their choice as well.
And what is, I guess, do you have to tell them like before you have sex with them? Is it?
I think.
What do the doctors normally tell you to do?
Yeah, so everyone is different. There's I've had a lot of people say, like the doctor said, don't worry because it's so common, you don't need to disclose it. But then also morally, like for me personally, I will tell someone, you know, if before I'm intimate with them, because I want to empower people with a choice. But yeah, it is, I think, completely up to the person and what they feel like they're capable with. But I do think disclosing is the better way to go. And then also, at the end of the day, if someone doesn't accept you, or if you're scared of disclosing to someone because they might not accept you, then potentially they're not the right person anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Have you found any misconceptions around herpes that you've encountered?
There is like a lot of, I guess, myths around it, you know, and I think even the other day I run a support group now monthly for women with HSV, and one of them was saying that someone had asked her, like, their housemate has herpes, like, can they get it from shared towels and things like this? And it's like, it's not a stupid question, but it's like, it's true. Like, we don't know. So you can't. I'll just clarify that. But yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, misconceptions. And I think the thing is, it's like, one of them is like, oh, if you sleep with someone, you're going to get it. Well, no, there's a lot of like things that you can put into place. Like if you don't have sex while you have an outbreak, if you wear protection, you can take suppressive therapy like antivirals to reduce the risk even further. But the risk is like, it's minimal. It's not to say it won't ever happen, but it just, sometimes I feel like you have almost less of a chance of getting it with someone that knows their sexual health status and someone that doesn't.
Yeah. You mentioned before that sort of your mental health plummeted when you told someone and they didn't react very well. How did they react?
It's juicy. So they pretty much, they thanked me for telling them on the phone, and then they said they had to go think about this.
Yeah.
And then more or less, like over the course of those days, like just ghosted me, and then like I just felt like was treated like less of a human because of it.
Yeah.
Previous to this, like we said, like, even if we don't work out, like we'll stay friends, because we really get along. And then that was just like off the cards. So I really felt like I was like a walking infection. At the time, I would have been super sensitive to this as well because I was very new at this whole thing.
It's right in the middle of it, yeah.
Yeah. And but I think realistically, like no one is to blame. Like everyone has their own reactions to things. It's just a very tricky thing for anyone to accept.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what was the turning point? I know you mentioned that you decided to sort of come out with it. What was that turning point for you?
To come out with it?
Yeah.
I was flying to Thailand like the next day, and there was this day and I was in the thick of it again with suicidal ideation and everything, and I was like, something has got to change. And so usually, like, if my head's going, I love like either a long drive or a big long walk. So I drove 3 hours south, so it was a big drive, and I got like an acai bowl and I drove 3 hours.
What, from Brisbane?
From Brisbane,
Which
yeah.
guy?
I drove to Gold Coast. I was like, I'll drive a bit further, and went to Byron, and then I drove
Did
back.
you?
Yeah.
Just
From
a thing.
Brisbane. Yeah. Just a thing, and an acai bowl.
Oh, I guess, yeah. Good acai bowls.
Yeah. But yeah, drove all that way, and it was on the drive back. I just couldn't. It's just like, why me? Like, why this? Like, why? I've already gone through the thick of my depression. I've gone through all this stuff in the Navy. I've then done everything. I've launched this book. Like, what more does like...
Why do I deserve this?
Yeah, exactly. And it was really negative thinking. But then on that drive, I was sitting... Well, I think when I had the acai bowl, I had an email pop up on my phone, and it was from these parents who were at the book launch. It was from the mum, and she said, this is a month after the book launch, and she said that she had finished reading the book, and it's really helped them support their son with depression. And also what I said at the book launch has really helped them like navigate this time of their lives. And I realized that my voice is still having impact 1 month after. So if my voice is still having an impact, you never know who it can influence, then I have to continue using my voice. And if I'm so passionate about speaking up about mental health, then why am I not going to talk about one of the things that I know is really like damaging mine? And so I kind of just put two and two together. I'm like, well, I'm going to speak up about it. Like, I might be crazy, but I'm going to do it, because if it's affecting me this much, and I've gone through all of this and I know how to like manage my triggers better, like imagine someone else that's sitting there unable to speak about it. Like, how is it impacting them? So I made that decision, and then I kind of just felt like, and then I got on the flight to Thailand, because before that drive, I didn't know if I'd cancel my flight or not. But I got on the flight, I wrote this piece on the plane, and then it kind of just tumbleweeded from there.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So what lessons have you learned about yourself during this time?
Well, these are great questions.
Thank you.
I made them myself. I have learned, I guess, it's really coming back to my truth, and that I think I mentioned it before, but it's as long as I follow the path of doing what I can to help other people, then I know like I'm going to be okay, like, because that seems to be the way that I heal myself. I turn my pain into purpose, and it helps me, it like lights a fire within me. But on the days when I don't feel like I have this, or like the weeks or months where I feel like I'm not really doing anything of substance or value, I can really get into the thick of it. I've also learned, like, along this whole journey, especially with HSV, it's like the self-acceptance piece. Like, you can't ask someone to accept you unless you accept you. Even without HSV aside, if you want to be in a relationship, or you even want like good like relationships, friendships, any of these things, if you aren't bringing your like complete self to the table, but then you're wanting someone else to bring their complete self, it's not fair. Like,
yeah, that's something I've learned is like I hear a lot of people they're searching for happiness, so I'll try find it in someone else. If I be with someone else, like, then I'll be happy.
yes.
And I'm always thinking, like, you'll never be happy unless you're happy with yourself first. You're never going to find happiness with someone else if you're not happy with yourself.
Exactly. And I think this was so much, like, even if you're looking for it in someone else, or you're looking for it in a certain object that you're going to buy, like, if we're constantly seeking external of ourselves for happiness, you're not going to find it. It's all, I believe, like, we already have everything we need within ourselves, like, for this. But yeah, it's really coming back to yourself and knowing, like, learning who you are and what makes you happy. And I think on that note, so for myself, one of the biggest lessons is I've got everything I need within myself. So until, you know, I meet someone that really matches what I have or is more, then I'm happy following this path. Like, I don't need someone to make myself happy. And I think in the past, at least before my marriage, like, I was definitely like probably wanted to make it work with people just for the sake of having somebody. But ever since leaving the marriage, and especially after this HSV piece, it's like, I don't want to settle for anything less than amazing, because I've got great stuff going on. Like, I'm completely happy with me. And yes, sometimes it gets lonely, but then you just go and you just talk to a random and just make some friends, or you just, like, you know, put that energy into something else. But if you're just constantly working on, like, improving yourself and leveling up for you, not for someone else, then, you know, it's just the best feeling ever.
Yeah, I've thought about that because I've had a lot of like friends in the mines, and you know, they've got partners and kids and stuff, and they love going away for the week. And I'm like, why do you love coming out here when you've got a wife and a couple of kids out here? He goes, oh, you won't understand, Elliott. Wait till you've got a wife and you've got kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'd rather be considered lonely, you know, alone, than be with someone or have a life that I don't want.
Yes.
Like, why do you guys go through this and have a life that you don't want and come out to the mines and escape? I'm like, the mines is shit.
Yeah.
Like, why do you want to come out here?
And I think you can be more lonely with someone with the wrong person than you are on your own. And I think you're always going to be, there's going to be uncomfortable periods in your life. You know, if you do have to leave, say, a relationship or a marriage that isn't right for you, it's not easy. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's far better than sitting in the wrong thing for a long time.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah. Whereas you could be, you know, chasing your dreams for the rest of your life and just seeing what good comes from that.
Yeah, no, I've got like some sort of friends in there, and they're like in their 30s and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, it's too late to start over. And I'm like, imagine saying that at 60. You know, or 70 or 50. Like, right now, you're only 32.
Exactly.
Like, you could live a whole nother life. Like, don't think that is stopping you from...
Yeah. And the time is now. Like, the future's not guaranteed. Like, if you... Yeah, it's never, ever too late to do anything. And I think even for me, like, I'm turning 31 in June. And then I think a lot of people, even still now, they're doing the house, the kids and the marriage, and they're so, so happy. And I'm super happy for them. But it's just not for me. But then some part of me sometimes is like, oh, should I be doing that because of this time? No, there is no time. Like, someone made that idea up in our head. Like, you can do anything at whatever time. You know, I might be 80 and meet the love of my life, and that will be okay.
Yeah, that'll be perfect.
Yeah, we'll just sit in the nursing home, have some cookies.
Playing bingo. What piece of advice could you pass on to someone who's maybe being diagnosed with herpes?
This is it's a really, really good one, and I think the biggest thing is to try and just sit with it. Like, allow yourself to feel everything that comes up, and don't try to think that you need to be you need to be better, you need to be happier than what you are, because it is. I think there is a period of grief that you will go through, because your life it shouldn't be different, but inevitably it will be a bit different. You will have to have different conversations with people, or, you know, depending on what it's like for you, you might need to navigate it differently. But think just sit with it and allow yourself to process it. And then when you're ready, try and find somebody that you feel safe enough to talk to, because often when I find, and even with running these support groups, that a lot of people, they keep it within themselves and then it just holds all this power. But since running these support groups, a lot of the girls that have, been diagnosed, they've slowly started to tell more of their circle, even just friends, and practicing telling friends. And now a lot of them are seeing new partners that they've told with confidence, because slowly they've stepped into their own power with it. So just find someone that you're happy to have these conversations with. And maybe you can try exercise that a bit more and, tell one person that went well, try another friend, try a family member, because the more you talk about it, the more you release the shame that it has over you, and you realize it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And I guess the less it defines you, I guess, as a person.
Yeah. Because I think if we really just don't, if you keep it bottled up inside, you are letting it sort of just have this power over you.
Have this labelled this
and you're
thing
I've got HSV. This is me now. Yeah. You are HSV. It's no, you're not.
No, not.
You're still you. This is the same as you get a cold sore, you get cold sores.
I've had chlamydia.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah. It's and the fact that you can say
Don't put that in. No, I'm just kidding.
But the fact that you can say it, shouldn't have any shame.
No.
Because also you can do all the things right, and then you can still get an STI. You can, it's with anything, you can, it's just a part of life.
You've just got to flip that bloody education around it with kids. I think it's just especially with boys. I mean, I'm talking just the boys here. It's just they never ask should we wear a condom? We should never ask. We never ask have you been tested or I've been tested? It's that conversation's never there. It's just straight dick in.
Yeah.
And then when it comes up later on, it's instantly,
Yes.
and it's just well, if we want to make it the norm when you don't ask about protection or you don't ask about getting tested or anything like that, make it the norm about talking about these sorts of things at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where the double standards come in, because I know for myself, no one has ever started that conversation with me. But I would always be okay, have you been tested? They'd be yep. I'd be okay, yep. And so maybe we wouldn't wear a condom, but I have always initiated that. So then if they don't start that conversation at that point, but then they care later on, it is double standards.
It is.
But I find often when they are having that conversation, it's usually about birth control. It's are you a birth control? Oh, yes or no, and they'll be oh, well, we won't wear a condom. It's but not around
there's other things.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're, you want to care, which is great, care all the way through, or at least, be willing to have these conversations and to be educated and stuff.
Be a bit more mature about how to deal with it.
Exactly right. Yeah, because it's just a little bit of maturity and also compassion for the other person. If someone's coming to you and they're sharing this information with you, it takes them a lot to do that.
Yeah, it's scary. It would be so scary.
Yeah. So just be kind, receive it with kindness, even if it's not something if you can accept. Just reflect that it's taken them a lot to be vulnerable with you. Yeah.
Talk about reflection. I'm sure you've had your time to reflect.
Yes.
What changes have you noticed about yourself since, I guess, joining the Navy and to where you are now?
I am a complete different person.
Are you?
Yeah. I don't think... Yeah. When I joined the Navy, I was a shy, 20-year-old girl, not really sure. I was easily manipulated and molded into whoever I wanted to be. And then slowly I started to gain more confidence in the Navy and make new friends and kind of step into who I was, but not really who I was, just wasn't as shy. But then when I left, and then since on this journey, I've really just, I'm just not willing to take any shit anymore as well. If something's not serving me, I'll just let it go. And it's tough and sometimes you feel selfish, but I just have been in the point too many times when my mental health is suffering and I just won't accept that, that I can't accept that anymore. So I put myself first. I'm on a podcast. I've been on podcasts. I've done my book launch, I'm a very open book. It's literally, but also things that usually are kept private are very public about me. There's not much that people don't know. And the fact that I used to be in high school, going red in the face, talking in front of people, shaking, but I'm now talking about like having herpes on, in front of 2 cameras.
Are you an introvert?
Definitely an introvert. I recharge my batteries by being on myself, but I need that sense of connection as well. I love my alone time and I love just doing my own thing, but I definitely do need to feel connected to people. Yeah, maybe a bit of a mix.
I think I'm a bit of a mix as well.
Yeah.
So what does the future hold? Do you have
plans?
Another book?
Yes, so I've been working on, it's going to be an ebook, this one, and then it's just got to be a resource for people with a positive herpes diagnosis, because what I realized when I came out with mine is so many people are reaching out, sharing their stories with me, and also saying that, my story has helped them to feel less alone. So I thought, similar theme with Keep Swimming, if I can collect these stories, put them out there in a way for people to read, then maybe they'll feel less alone, know that it's possible to get through it. And so I started working on that last year and had interviews with, there's over 26 people in this book sharing their stories, and there's some incredible stories in there, and that will be hopefully coming out this year. It was going to be a printed book, but I kind of want to keep it online because I think it's a lot more accessible for people. And so I'm 3/4 of the way through that. And
what's that one called, sorry?
It's I've got to give you.
Are we giving it away?
Yeah, we'll give it away. It's going to be called The Gift.
The Gift.
Yeah,
nice.
Because I think it took me a while. I think for those, if you know, but also it can be seen as a gift because you can learn so much more about yourself. It makes you so self-aware, how to look after your health, how to look after your mental health, all these things.
So many silver linings that have come out.
So many. Yeah, my life is infinitely better since having HSV, just in the way that I even just approach new relationships. I'm so confident and happy on my own. So I'm not really going to stress about that unless it's, someone I really want to approach. Whereas back in the past, probably previous to HSV, I might have been more careless about these things. But yeah, definitely more self-aware. So there you go. You got a little snippet.
Yeah, nice.
Gift. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like it's almost made you put more effort into your own self-image.
Yeah.
And take priorities on how do you view yourself.
Yeah, definitely. It forces you to look at that, I think, because, in the past I probably put this aside and no, just get, focus on my mental health and helping other people. But it definitely makes you think about what you're willing to accept in your life, and also how you treat yourself, how you treat your body, what you eat, what you consume, all these things that do or can impact, your life moving forward. So it's only ever been a good thing for me.
Now.
I think with anything, I like to look back at my life and say, even though these things hurt and are painful, I wouldn't change a single thing because I wouldn't be here right now. So I'd keep it all the same.
I love that. Some quick fire questions to finish.
Pew, pew.
How have you defined success?
This is a great question. I always say, especially around my book, people are like, how successful is it, blah, blah, blah. I always said I would never measure the success of it in the sales that it got, but more in how it's impacted people. And that to me is it, even helping one person is successful. So for me, success is something when I feel like I've done something of value to something. I've turned, I guess, pain into purpose and help. So I think it's it's a very individual concept, success, because someone will see, I've got this much money in the bank, I've this car, this job, I've just got promoted, I'm successful. But for me, I'm like, oh, actually, even every day I wake up and I don't have a heavy feeling, that's success, So it's just that feeling inside when you feel like you're on the right path. I think that's when it's successful.
Yeah, because I've felt the exact same way the reason I started this was I listened to a podcast and a guy was speaking about his mental health struggles, and he played rugby and got into drugs and alcohol, and it was literally my story. And that impacted me so much that I was like, whoa, if he's got something to say, maybe I've got something to say. And that's why I sort of started this. If I can help one person, and then not knowing how it was going to end up, and then within one episode someone said how much that episode helped them, I'm like, oh shit,
it's crazy.
Maybe I could keep doing this.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's I feel the same. It's so crazy. I honestly thought my story was so individual. Like no one could relate, or no one could sort of see it in a different way. But now I've realized, so I've had so many people respond to these episodes and to this podcast, and I'm like, holy shit.
It's kind of incredible.
Maybe I'm not alone.
Yeah, no, well, that's it. And we think that we are, but we're definitely not. But it's amazing that you've then like found like, you know, if you can help one person, then you realize that it's just these ripple effects too, because you've helped one person, but then so many more. And then those people one day will do the same. Like that guy has helped you, but then you've helped these people.
I never thought about that. Yeah.
This is how change is made.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've received?
Oh, I don't even know where I received this one from, but it's one that sticks in my head all the time, and it's nothing changes if nothing changes. And so I can be in the thick of it sometimes, and I'll like sit there for quite a while, but unless I get up and actively do something about it, I'm going to stay in the thick of it. And I think about this with everything in my life, you know, if I'm unhappy with a marriage, like nothing changes if nothing changes. Like you have these conversations, you see how it goes. You have to make change for change to occur. And I think this one is big because often, especially like I've done it before, like the negative thinking comes in like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why me? This will only push you down further. But if you can accept like you've got to do something, even if this is the smallest thing, if you wake up and you're not feeling great, or if you're really in the thick of it, be like, oh, I just need to do something different today. Like just get up, shower, wash your face, go for a walk around the block. If that's all you do, maybe that's one step better than yesterday. But then slowly, small changes, I think, make the biggest impact.
100%. That's what I've gathered too. Is like that victim mentality gets you nowhere, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, never serves nobody.
What's the worst piece of advice you received?
Oi. I don't know. I think there's maybe not like any singular piece of advice, but more or less listening to what other people think I should do. Yeah. It's a big thing. I think I listened for too long what other people like believed I should do, and that's how I ended up, you know, in the situation where I was married but deeply unhappy because I hadn't actually listened to my gut, which was telling me that I need to actually take time to be with myself. So yeah, I think that's a big one.
This might be a tricky question. What's a life lesson you've learnt the hard way?
Oh, this is a tricky question. What's a life lesson you've learnt the hard way?
Probably listening to people.
Yeah. Well, yes, you know, inevitably, I think definitely same thing. So listening to people or falling like into the trap of what society expects of you. I think you really have to follow your own path. You only have one life. Your time's not guaranteed, you know, and I spent too long following what other people think I should do. And the fact that I spent so much money on a marriage, on a wedding, and it was beautiful, but all of this stuff, like, and it shaped who I am now. But if you look back at it, it's kind of like, that was not for me. It's for everybody else. But then now that I pick things for me, things really are working out for me, and it's for the better. So, yeah.
It's amazing how the more you lean into who you are, the more doors will open and all these things start happening.
Yeah, and I noticed it the minute that I made the decision to leave the marriage, a few weeks later, I was able to wean myself off antidepressants just because I was listening to my gut and my soul felt happy again. It's weird.
If you could go back to a time in your life, where would you go and why?
Oh, wow. I think of this one often. But honestly, it's probably no one point, but it's literally I'll go sit on the beach by myself by the water, having a acai bowl, read a book, like this simple time, anytime. Yeah. Because that is the moment when I am at my purest self and I'm the happiest because I'm not doing anything but what I want to be doing, which is just to sit there in stillness and in quiet, watch the waves roll in, jump in the water, have some healthy food, go for a walk on the beach. That's me.
Cleanse the soul.
Yeah.
There's a really nice quote from you, actually, I saw on your Instagram. It's how your life feels to you is far more important than how it looks to someone else. If you could go back to 19, 20-year-old Annaliese, is that the piece of advice you would give her?
Actually, yeah.
Would it?
Yeah. I would definitely give her that because, maybe she'd learn early then. But I love that quote too because we often think, you know, you've got to have this perfect life with other people looking in on it and we're doing what looks good. But really, when your life feels like, I had all the things. I had what everybody wanted and I was still deeply unhappy because I wasn't following what was right for me. And now that I have, like, my life feels like better. Like, I still definitely have like really, really trying times, and I work through that. But
you feel fulfilled.
Yeah. And I know, like, again, like, as long as I follow what's right for me, I can't really fall back into that. You know, it's like this force that you're trying to make something work that just isn't. You know, but yeah, I do like that quote.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, thanks again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I admire you a lot. Love what you're doing, and I can't wait for the release of the gift.
Yes. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on. Like, I think what you're doing is great, and, you know, your conversations are making impact. So
thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.